with certainty that it attaches to the human embryo at the 21st day, the third week, which is why they have a certain perspective on abortion, which reconciles our polarity. We discuss this in the film, too. Okay, so they claim also that with their science, which they say is about 8,000 years ahead of us, which some people might say, well, that's not all that much, but you look at it exponentially, what are scientific developments in 50 years?
Yeah.
And, 8,000 years is some pretty swift stuff.
Assuming things progress all equally throughout the universe in terms of time, 8,000 years is like a zillion years in terms of knowledge.
Yeah. Yes, and the developments. I mean, look what's happened with the telephone, the portable phone, the iPad, all this stuff. And Meyer was telling me about little computers that they have that are about a quarter inch by quarter inch that are in orbit that are 90. What did he call it? Terabytes or something? I'm not a high-tech guy, but some really phenomenal amount of it, like plasma computers, and way beyond me. And supposedly when the extraterrestrial that comes to him most often, this guy Patak, comes to and says, well, show me on your computer. And he says, show me how to do that, because it's rather primitive for me. We have different things. You can imagine that we have some pretty swift stuff, but if you've got 8,000 years technology, it's going to look different. Well, to get back to why Billy Meier, so we don't hang that out on the laundry line too long, they claim that they can identify and track, if you will, the human spirit, so they can know from, that person that's right now, John Smith, in the past lifetime before this was Shirley Adams, and before that was so-and-so, and what they're saying is this, that the spirit that animates Billy Meier, the one-armed Swiss farmer now, is in immensely ancient spirit form, probably the most ancient spirit running around the universe, embodied, and that spirit form has taken on a specific task to act as a prophet in this and in other worlds at different times for the reasons of bringing the teaching of truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of life to humans, and that each of the 6 previous times in our world when that Spirit incarnated as prophets whose names we will recognize very easily, those teachings were altered and corrupted and turned into religions that only contain a bare reflection of some of the real truths, and that the teaching is never intended to get people to follow a leader or a god or even a prophet or anyone. It's not to deify. It's to liberate so that people get the truth, and the truth of the teaching is that each human has an indwelling, eternal, immortal spirit that evolves over these countless millions and millions of lifetimes before it goes into even the lower levels of spiritual development. We're not going into our light bodies next year, folks, or even in 2010 or 2012. And that what happens is the consciousness of the individual, the personality. I'm Michael, you're George, hey, there's Sally, I see Yoko's over there. The personality and consciousness are responsible for themselves. We are responsible for ourselves individually to grow, to learn, and to not dwell in belief of any kind. Hard idea. Not to believe anything, but to find out truth for ourselves. Now, there are certainly consensus realities we operate by. We believe if we flip the switch, the lights go on. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the most profound truths about life and existence, about creation, that these are things that we individually have to come to terms with, to seek, to struggle with, and we can join together with like-minded people, not to create or follow hierarchies, gurus, masters, leaders, gods, angels, saints, or anything of the like. We must become the heroes in our own lives, but we come together in an ever-evolving collective to become the people of Earth, as opposed to the 150 different countries. We don't have to lose our identities. We don't have to lose cultures, but we will become unified in the pursuit of the higher principles and truth, not in the beliefs that have brother and sister polarized against each other in war and terrorism, etc. And unfortunately, along with secular traditions and beliefs, lots of religious stuff leads us into these things.
Sure.
And this is counter the purpose of life. Meyer is simply the last, they say, person who will perform this quote-unquote job of prophet, simply meaning a truth bringer, and it's not a celebrity thing. 21 attempts in your life doesn't give you a big, contract, except there's contracts out on you. So he simply is the guy who had the strength of character. They knew they could identify this is the old spirit. And there were 5 other people also, not of exactly the same potential, but potentially could have done this job. Any one of them would have been that person for this time, and he was the one, and he was the one who's done it 6 other times. Okay. Or his spirit has been done.
Let's talk a little bit, and then we'll get into some of these other very controversial items at the top of the hour. Michael, the red flag. You said as you got into this that you even had a few doubts.
Well, yes. Let me just tell you what it was. What happened was in 1986, I got the transcripts that contained the 1,800 pages of the conversations that Meyer allegedly was having with these extraterrestrials for about a 3-year period, but also in those transcripts, and this is important, he was referring back to other things that he learned in the 50s, and then as time went on, I came into contact with those documents, and they corroborated. However, here's where I get concerned. As I started to read this, I noticed that the people are very plain-spoken. They don't talk like New Age people, like greetings, we are the Space Brothers, come to you in love, and there's none of that stuff. It's like, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, this is this, and that is that, and we've come to tell you this, and this is your responsibility. Okay, and in there was a lot of stuff about different countries, and there was stuff in there about Israel. Now, I'm not religious. I wasn't raised religiously, but my background, I had 2 Jewish parents. And I learned that I was Jewish from some of the kids in the neighborhood who had certain expletives for me and chased me, and we'd gotten fights and stuff. So I had some sensitivity to that. Now, I read stuff in the Meyer material that was talking about the errors of Israel and what it was bringing down upon itself, and how the people must change their ways, and how this was an ancient thing. And I'm going, well, wait a minute, I wonder if could this be Nazis from outer space? I mean, really, that came up for me, and I thought, well, how am I going to know this? I know I'm going to read the things that they're referring to. They were referring to things even like in the Old Testament, and I'd never read these Bibles. Yeah. So I went in, and I started to see what the information was, and I started to come away with an understanding that, my gosh, they're not being anti-anybody. They are trying to lay out something which got further illuminated when the Talmud Emmanuel was published. What they're trying to say is, look, we are not diplomats. We have no vested interest in making things sweet for you. We tell the truth as we know it, and if you will stop lying to yourselves, you won't destroy yourselves. And here's what we have to tell you about the Palestinians, and here's what we have to tell you about the Israelis, and about the Russians and the Chinese, and this, because they're equal opportunity offenders, if you want to look at it that way. So what they said was, and this is where people will get uncomfortable, some will, and some will not. But I will preface it by saying this. They also are the biggest critics of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which they identify as a terrible anti-Semitic tract, which is vile and intended to create anti-Semitism in the world. They also spoke about many things pertaining to the persecutions during World War II, and they put it out as information. To them, it's neutral. It's information. This is this. However, here were the hot buttons. And they said, look, you have to understand that in the historical reality is these lands belong to other people. Then the ancient peoples, who were the Israelites and the Hebrews of the time, took these lands, and in so doing, this is my condensed version, cause and effect was, there were things set in motion, just like we set things in motion when we came, our ancestors, for those of us that came to this country and ripped it away from the Native Americans, the Indians here, or those people who trafficked in slaves, and discrimination of all sorts that existed up until even in the last century. What they're saying is you have to be able to face these realities and understand that hatreds and things like this don't simply arise out of nothing. Now, there are some people that will hate out of nowhere, but there are core events historically, such as how the lands got taken from the Canaanite people, et cetera, and this is something, if you want, we can explore more, but this is, I finally reconciled and saw they're trying to prevent us and the Israelis and the Arabs in the Middle East from blowing themselves to smithereens.
Interesting. Let's talk about the